Nancy, and today we will be exploring Erikson's psychosocial theory. So, psychosocial theory plays such a significant role in developmental psychology, and many educators still apply his theory in teaching today. There are a few things that we'll be discussing today that will make Erikson's theory so special. One is that psychosocial theory is across the lifespan. Second is that instead of focusing on individual development, this theory contains a social component which we will dive deeper in this presentation. We will also breaking up this presentation into two parts because the presentation is pretty long, and I do want to make a stop in the middle where I do want the student to watch this TED Talk by Dr. Jeffrey Arnett. We are going to explain the overview of psychosocial theory. In the second part, we'll be discussing more in details of life stages, and we'll also be watching a TED Talk by Dr. Jeffrey Arnett that will show how culture has shifted developmental stages and the significance of that. So let's begin. This is Nancy, and today So some of the goals for this presentations are, one, students will be able to summarize the 8 stages of development in Erikson's psychosocial theory. Second, student will be able to give some example for each developmental stages. At the end of the presentation, student will have a basic understanding of the basis of the theory. And lastly, I would like the student to be able to think critically about how culture has shifted the developmental stages. So before we go into the theory itself, I do want to discuss a little bit about Erikson's background and how that his background has influenced him with coming up with psychosocial developmental theory. So Erikson was born in Frankfurt, Germany in 1902. He was raised by his mother and his stepfather. Erikson did not know that his stepfather was his biological father, which he found out later. When he discovered this information, he became confused with his own identity. His early experience sparked his interest in formation of identity. So he received Freudian psychoanalysis training from Anna Freud, who was the daughter of Sigmund Freud. Freud introduced him to psychoanalysis, and Anna Freud encouraged him to formally study psychoanalysis. So he went to Vienna and studied psychoanalysis at the Vienna Psychoanalytic Institute in Austria. Erikson then moved to the United States in 1933, and he became the first child psychoanalyst and obtained a position at Harvard Medical School. Erikson's early childhood experience, his Freudian training, and traveling through different countries really shaped the development of psychosocial theory. So psychosocial theory was influenced by Freud due to his psychoanalysis training that Erikson received. The development are divided into stages according to its proximate age. A person will experience a psychosocial crisis at each life stage, and the person can have a positive or negative outcome according to the theory. So according to the theory, successful completion of each stage will result in healthy personality and acquisition of basic virtue. In Erikson's theory, virtue is referred to as the identity strength. As you can see in this chart, that it's divided by different age group and also different psychosocial crises that we will actually go into details in later part of this presentation. And the virtues are listed in this chart. So in the chart, it lists all the virtue that a person can gain at each stage. The characteristic strengths are tools that can be used to resolve subsequent crises, and vice versa. That failure to complete the stage can result in reduced ability to complete first stages and create a more unhealthy personality and poor sense of self. So Erikson actually believes that people does not need to meet that stage in order to move on to the next stage, but however that the people may actually create a unhealthy personality and experiencing crisis later on in the life. One thing that Erikson pointed out was that culture changes over time and that society meets one's generation may prove to be inadequate for the next generation. So children actually need to be taught what's appropriate at their time in order to develop a healthy personality. Psychosocial theory proceeds to psychosocial theory actually proceeds according to an epigenetic principle which increasingly differentiates and develops as it shapes by its environment. So Erikson's theory, or Erikson is also known as a neo-Freudian theorist. So Erikson accepted the basic notion of Freudian theory about the unconscious and the conscious mind in the psychosexual stages. However, he expanded on this Freudian theory and covering the entire lifespan. Not only he considered the biology and the physical maturation, like in Freud's theory, he also considered the vast influence of society on development. Erikson was moving away from the emotional disorder that was emphasized in Freudian theory, but you can still observe the influence of Freudian psychosexual stages. In this chart, you can see how Erikson's psychosocial theory corresponds to Freud's psychosexual stages. In psychosocial theory, physical maturation has a personal and social repercussion. Erikson believes that the society has evolved to meet children's needs at each stage, including parents, school, and other societal organizations. Psychosocial development is culturally embedded in that each culture has its own special way to meet the child's need at a specific stage. Erikson used this term called cogwheeling, which refers to adults' need to become a caretaker, will coincides with the children's need to caretaking. A child surrounded by adults who are at stages where they have the need to take care of others. In other words, that each child is a life cycle that is a part of a larger community of a life cycle. So we have a quote here by Dr. Seuss that I want to include in this presentation that shows the emphasis that Erikson placed on identity in his theory. The quote says, "Today you are you, that is true, that true. There is no one alive who is your than you." Erikson sees that identity is understanding and acceptance of both the self and one society. Unlike Freud's theory that emphasized on people's defending themselves from unpleasant tension or unpleasant experiences, Erikson has a more positive approach that Erikson believes that people are in a constant quest for identity. individual will reconfirm their sense of identity if everything goes well in that life stage and on to the next level. Identity from the previous stage will influence the next stage. With Erickson's background as an immigrant to the United States, he feels that the culture and society has an influence on the individual's identity. He believes that culture as a whole can create issues or identity crises that are specific for that period or culture. People need to work through the crisis experience within that stage before moving on to the next life stage. Erickson divided the entire lifespan across into 8 stages of men. Each stage has its own critical issues. In the next few slides, we'll be going over an overview of each stage. Erickson believes that each individual will experience crises that can lead to both positive and negative outcome. Ideally, the person will develop a favorable ratio towards positive outcome. If the childhood crises are not handled satisfactorily, then the person will continue to fight his early childhood crisis later in life. Many adults may struggle to develop a sense of identity. However, Erickson believed that an early childhood crisis can actually be resolved later in life. Erickson states that each life stage builds upon the previous stage and influences the later stage as well. So I'm actually going to break up the video at this point, and we will start the next video onto the 8 stages of development. So the first stage starts from birth to 18 months. During this stage, infants must rely on their caretaker for food and shelter and other basic needs to survive. Children who can depend on their parents for these needs will develop trust. Erickson believed that children who trust their parents will develop hope, which will tell them that the world can be trusted. The virtue that develops at this stage is hope. When infants have hope, infant knows that there are people that there could be a source of support. So in the first stage is it's a struggle between trust versus mistrust. So consistency among a caretaker will, become trust, where mistrust can create suspicion and anxiety. So failure to acquire hope will lead to development of fear, anxiety, insecurity, and feeling of mistrust. A baby may end up crying a lot and become even more anxious and more fearful than a typical infant. At stage 2 of the psychosocial theory, which is autonomy versus shame and doubt. So, within this stage, children are usually it's across the lifespan between 18 months to 3 years old. At this stage, children begin to do things on their own and seeking autonomy. Children have the capacity to move around due to physical development at this stage. So children are starting to gain a sense of independence. Success at this stage will lead to the virtue of will. Children become more confident and secure about their ability. The counterpart of autonomy is shame and doubt that can lead to a loss of confidence. Erickson noted that it's a delicate balance that is required from the parents during this time. The parents must not try to do everything for their child, and at the same time, parents should not criticize their child for failure and accident. Erickson stated that in a well-functioning society, a sense of autonomy is encouraged and maintained throughout their life.